There is a specific weight to a certified letter that you can feel before you even tear the perforated cardboard strip. It's heavy. It feels like judgment. It feels like a headache wrapped in government-grade cardstock. I was standing in the middle of my driveway, the asphalt radiating a shimmering heat that made the air wobble around my ankles. It was a Tuesday. I should have been at work, but I'd taken a half-day to fix a leaky faucet, thinking I was going to have a productive, responsible afternoon as a homeowner. Instead, I was holding this envelope, staring at the return address. The Oak Creek Estates Homeowners Association. The stamp wasn't even licked. It was one of those printed postage meters. Cold and efficient. I looked up from the envelope to my house. It was a house. A perfectly good, standard American house. 2 stories, attached garage, decent shingles, and painted a color that the Sherman-Williams catalog called sand dune. It was beige. A nice, warm, inoffensive beige. It was the color of coffee, with exactly 2 creamers in it. It was the color of a golden retriever puppy, if you squinted hard enough. It was clean, it was fresh. I had painted it myself literally 11 months ago. I ripped the strip. The letter inside was printed on thick, cream-colored linen paper. The header featured the Oak Creek logo, an oak tree that didn't actually exist in the neighborhood, and a creek that was really a drainage ditch behind the Circle K. Dear Mr. Henderson, it has come to the attention of the Architectural Control Committee, ACC, that the exterior maintenance of your property at 742 Evergreen Terrace has fallen below the community standards required to maintain the visual harmony and vibrational integrity of Oak Creek Estates. I blinked. Vibrational integrity? I kept reading. Specifically, the exterior paint color, identified as sand dune, has been deemed aesthetically lethargic. While neutral tones are generally encouraged, the specific hue, combined with the lack of contrasting trim, creates a visual void that lowers the energy of the street. Several complaints have been filed regarding the dullness of the property, describing it as spiritually draining and an eyesore of mediocrity. Pursuant to Article 4, Section 2 of the CCNRs, you are hereby ordered to repaint the exterior siding to a more vibrant, light-reflecting standard that contributes to the neighborhood's brightness. This work must be completed within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in a daily fine of $500 until the violation is rectified. $500 a day. I lowered the letter. Aesthetically lethargic. My house was being accused of being lazy. My siding was apparently clinically depressed. I see you got the notice. The voice drifted over from the sidewalk, sickeningly sweet, like cough syrup that's gone bad in the sun. I didn't have to look to know who it was, but I looked anyway. Mrs. Gable. She was standing at the edge of my lawn, never on the grass, because that would be trespassing, and she knew the laws better than the Supreme Court, wearing a flowy, floral caftan thing that looked like it cost more than my car. She had oversized sunglasses perched on a nose that had likely seen a surgeon more recently than I'd seen a dentist, and she was holding a clipboard. Mrs. Gable was the president of the HOA, the head of the Architectural Control Committee, and the self-appointed guardian of Oak Creek's vibe. "Patricia," I said, trying to keep the growl out of my voice. "What is this?" She took a dainty step forward, clicking a pen against her clipboard. "It's a notification, Mark. A call to action. We're trying to elevate the neighborhood. Property values are stagnating, and do you know why?" "Interest rates?" I suggested. "The economy?" "The energy," she corrected, waving a hand vaguely at my house. "Look at it. Just look at it, Mark. It absorbs light. It doesn't give anything back. It's just sitting there. It's a black hole of beige. It's making people sad to drive past it. It's beige, Patricia. It's the same beige as the Miller's house 3 doors down. The Millers have desert sand, she snapped, her voice hardening instantly. It has a pink undertone. It's welcoming. Yours has a gray undertone. It's despondent. I had a feng shui consultant walk the block last Thursday. She stopped in front of your driveway and actually got a migraine. She said the chai stops flowing right here at your mailbox. It hits your house and just dies. I looked at my house again. I saw stucco. I saw wood trim. I didn't see a murderer of chi. You want me to repaint my entire house because a consultant got a headache? I want you to repaint your house because it violates the bylaws regarding community aesthetics, she said, dropping the spiritual act for a second to reveal the bureaucrat underneath. Article 4 says homes must be vibrant and clean. This is clean, sure, but it is the opposite of vibrant. It's an aesthetic coma. I felt the sweat trickling down my back, and it wasn't just the heat anymore. I painted this less than a year ago. It cost me $3 grand in materials and 2 weeks of my life. I'm not doing it again. She sighed. A long, pitiful sound, like I was a toddler refusing to eat his broccoli. Then you'll pay the fines. $500 a day, Mark. Starting in 30 days, that's $15,000 a month. I imagine a repaint is cheaper than that. Just brighten it up. Give us some sparkle, some life. We want to see reflection. We want to see brilliance. We want to look at this lot and feel awake. She turned to leave, her caftan billowing in the hot breeze. Wait, I called out. What colors are approved? Is there a list? She stopped and looked back over her shoulder, smiling that tight, venomous smile. The bylaws don't specify a list, Mark. We believe in creative freedom, within the boundaries, of good taste. The rule simply states the exterior must be vibrant, light-reflecting, and contribute to the brightness of the community. Use your imagination. Just stop being so opaque. She walked away, heading toward her own house directly across the street. A pristine, sage-green monstrosity with white trim and exactly 6 garden gnomes arranged by height. I stood there for a long time. I watched a bird land on my roof gutter. It didn't look depressed. It looked like a bird. I walked inside, slamming the front door hard enough to rattle the frame. The air conditioning hit me, but it didn't cool me down. My blood was boiling. It wasn't just the money, it was the arrogance. Aesthetically lethargic. I went into my office, a room that was currently a chaotic mix of unpaid bills, half-finished car parts, and a dusty bookshelf. I shoved a box of spark plugs aside and dug for the binder. Every homeowner gets one when they close on the house, the Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions. The CC&Rs, the Bible of the suburbs. I hadn't opened it since the day I signed the mortgage. I blew the dust off the cover and cracked it open. I needed to know exactly what I was up against. I needed to see the wording. If they wanted a war, I was going to fight it with their own ammunition. I flipped past the sections on pet waste and decibel limits, a section I had memorized after my neighbor complained about my table saw. I found Article 4, Architectural Control. I scanned the text, my finger tracing the lines. Section 1, General Maintenance, blah blah blah. Section 2, Exterior Surfaces. Here it was. All exterior surfaces of the primary residence and detached structures must be maintained in a condition that preserves the attractiveness of the subdivision. Colors and materials must be consistent with the high standards of Oak Creek Estates. To ensure community vitality, exterior facades must be vibrant, clean, and contribute to the neighborhood's brightness. Dull, unkempt, or fading surfaces that detract from the visual harmony are prohibited. I read it again. Vibrant. Clean. Contribute to the neighborhood's brightness. I sat back in my chair. There was no mention of specific color codes, no mention of matte versus gloss, no mention of desert sand versus sand dune. It was entirely subjective. It was written vaguely on purpose so that people like Patricia Gable could weaponize it whenever they felt like someone's aura was off. But vagueness cuts both ways. I looked at the word brightness. Patricia had said it herself. We want reflection. We want brilliance. I swiveled my chair around and looked out the window. Across the street, Patricia was in her front yard, watering her petunias. She looked content. She looked like a woman who had just won a battle she didn't even think was a fight. She thought she had crushed me. She thought I would go to Home Depot, buy 5 gallons of Sunbeam Yellow, and meekly repaint my house like a good little drone. She wanted light reflecting. My eyes drifted to the corner of my desk, where a sample piece of polished aluminum sat. I worked in industrial supply chain management. Specifically, I sourced materials for commercial skyscrapers and high-end automotive facilities. I used that piece of aluminum as a paperweight. It was a sample of ACM, aluminum composite material. This specific sample was Superchrome 3000. It wasn't just silver. It was a mirror. I picked it up. I could see my own face in it perfectly, distorted only slightly by the curve of my thumb. It caught the light from the desk lamp and threw a dazzling beam across the room, hitting the opposite wall with a spotlight intensity. I looked at the sample. Then I looked at the CC&Rs. Must be vibrant. Check. Must be clean. It's literally polished metal. Dirt slides right off. Must contribute to the neighborhood's brightness. A slow, cold grin spread across my face. If I covered my house in this, I wouldn't just contribute to the brightness. I would be the brightness. I would be the sun. I pulled up my email. I needed to contact Big Jim. Jim was a contractor I dealt with for work. He didn't do residential. He built casinos. He built car dealerships. He built things that required cranes and steel permits. But he owed me a favor from when I expedited a shipment of steel beams for him last year during the supply chain crisis. I dialed his number. "Mark?" His voice boomed over the speakerphone. It sounded like he was standing next to a jackhammer. "What's up, buddy? You need those invoices?" "No invoices, Jim. I need a quote." "For the warehouse project?" "No," I said, leaning back, spinning the chrome sample in my fingers. "For my house." "Your house? What, you doing a remodel? Kitchen, bath?" "Siding," I said. "Exterior siding." "I don't do vinyl, Mark, you know that. I'm an industrial guy." "I don't want vinyl, Jim. I want ACM panels. The mirror finish. The high polish stuff we used on the facade of that tech center in downtown Phoenix." There was a silence on the other end of the line. The jackhammer noise seemed to fade away. "You want mirror panels on your house?" Jim asked slowly. "Like a suburban house? In a neighborhood?" "Yes. Every square inch. Fascia, soffits, siding. If it's wood, I want it covered in chrome." "Mark," Jim said, his voice dropping an octave. "Have you been drinking? It's 2:00 p.m. "I'm sober as a judge, Jim. I just got a letter from my HOA. They said my beige paint was spiritually draining. They told me I need to be more vibrant. They demanded brilliance and reflection." I heard Jim snort, then a chuckle, then a full-blown belly laugh that distorted the phone speaker. "You're messing with me." "I am absolutely serious. I have 30 days to comply, or they fine me $500 a day. I need to know if you can do it." "Can I do it?" Mark, I can wrap up to doghouse in titanium if the check clears. But you know what this is going to look like, right? You're going to look like a UFO crashed into a split level. Does it violate building codes? Building codes? No, Jim said, the gears turning in his head. As long as it's properly anchored and weather-sealed, the city doesn't care if your house looks like a baked potato. It's fire-resistant. It's durable. It's insulated. Technically, it's an upgrade, a very expensive, very insane upgrade. How expensive? For a house your size, materials and labor, you're looking at 40, maybe 50 grand. That high-polish chrome is custom order. I winced. 50 grand. That was my emergency fund. That was the new truck fund. That was a significant chunk of my life savings. I looked out the window again. Patricia was now pruning her roses. She stopped, looked at my house, and shook her head with a look of theatrical pity, as if my house had a terminal illness. "Mark?" Jim asked. "You still there?" "I'm here," I said. "Do it. Order the panels. I want the highest reflectivity rating you can get without requiring a hazmat suit." "You're the boss," Jim said, and I could hear the grin in his voice. "I'll bring the crew out on Monday. We'll measure it up. But Mark?" "Yeah? Buy some sunglasses." I hung up the phone. My heart was hammering in my chest, a mix of adrenaline and financial terror. But as I looked at the sand dune beige wall of my office, I didn't feel lethargic anymore. I felt energized. I felt vibrant. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a beer. I walked out to the front porch and sat down on the steps. Patricia saw me. She waved, a tiny, condescending flutter of her fingers. "Visualizing a new color, Mark?" she called out. I raised my beer in a toast. "Oh, I've got the color, Patricia," I shouted back. "It's going to be absolutely brilliant. You're going to love it. It's going to change the whole energy of the street." "That's wonderful," she beamed, clasping her hands together. "I knew you'd come around. Just remember, light, bright, and happy." "Light and bright," I repeated, taking a sip. "You have no idea." The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. I watched the way the light hit Patricia's house. Her vinyl siding was old, a bit warped in places, but generally intact. Her windows were clean. Her life was orderly. She had no idea that she had just declared war on a man who sourced industrial materials for a living. She wanted vibrations? I was about to give her a frequency she'd never forget. Big Jim's truck arrived on Monday morning at 7 o'clock a.m. sharp, and it was the first violation of the Oak Creek Estate's unspoken code of conduct. It wasn't a pickup. It was a Ford F-450 Super Duty dually with a utility bed, a lumber rack that looked like it could support a bridge, and a diesel engine that idled with the subtle acoustic profile of a tectonic plate, shifting. It took up my entire driveway and hung about 4 feet over the sidewalk. I watched from the living room window as the curtains across the street twitched. Patricia was watching. Of course she was. She probably had a seismograph installed in her foyer to detect unauthorized heavy machinery. I walked out to meet him. Jim was a mountain of a man, built like a vending machine that had been wrapped in Carhartt canvas. He stepped out of the truck, crushing a rogue dandelion under a boot the size of a cinder block. He looked at my house, then he looked at the pristine, manicured lawns on either side. And then he looked at me. "This is the place?" he asked, his voice a gravelly rumble. "This is the combat zone, Jim," I said, shaking his hand. He adjusted his ball cap, which bore the logo of a steel foundry. "It's quiet. Too quiet. I feel like I should be whispering." "Give it time. The HOA president lives right there." I pointed to the sage green house across the street. "She's the target audience." Jim squinted at Patricia's house. "Sage green vinyl, standard 4x4 profile. Cheap stuff, Melts if you look at it wrong. I smiled. That's an interesting observation, Jim. Very interesting. Jim grabbed a clipboard and a laser distance measurer from his truck. All right, let's look at the canvas. You were serious on the phone? We're really doing this? Dead serious. I want full coverage. Every inch of beige siding needs to be gone. We walked around the perimeter of the house. Jim was professional, snapping laser measurements and scribbling notes, but every few minutes he'd stop, look at the house, and just shake his head. Technically, Jim said, tapping the side of the house with his knuckles, this is a retrofit. We're gonna have to strap the walls. We'll run Z-girts horizontally, then mount the ACM panels vertically. It'll push the facade out about 2 inches, gives you an air gap, improves your R value, your energy. Bills are gonna drop. I don't care about the energy bills, Jim. I care about the finish. Right. The super chrome. Jim stopped and opened a heavy Pelican case he'd brought from the truck. He popped the latches and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in custom-cut foam, were sample squares of various metallic finishes. He pulled one out. It was blinding. This is the stuff, Jim said, holding it carefully by the edges. Alucobond Spectra, custom mirror finish. Usually we use this for accents. You know, a strip here or there on a casino entrance. Maybe a column cover in a high-end mall. I've never, and I mean literally never, seen someone wrap a residential 2-story in it. I took the sample. It was heavy, rigid, and cold. I held it up. I could see the reflection of the oak tree behind me in perfect, high-definition clarity. It wasn't like a bathroom mirror where the glass absorbs some light. This was polished aluminum. It was aggressive. What's the reflectivity rating? I asked. Percentage? Jim scratched his beard. It's about 98% specular reflection. Basically, if light hits it, it comes back. It doesn't get absorbed. It bounces. You do the whole house in this, and you're essentially building a lighthouse, but without the spinning light. It's just static brilliance. Is it durable? Mark, this stuff is rated for hurricanes. It's got a Kynar clear coat that protects the polish. UV resistant, scratch resistant, graffiti resistant. If someone keys your house, the key will probably break before the panel does. Perfect, I said. How soon can we start? Jim looked at his notes. I can get the material here by Wednesday. It's sitting in a warehouse in California. My supplier has been trying to offload it for 3 years. Nobody wants 10,000 square feet of mirror. They'll probably throw a party when I place the order. Do it, I said. And Jim, I need it done fast, before she figures out what's happening. She? Jim jerked his head toward the street. Patricia. She thinks I'm repainting. Jim grinned, a slow, terrifying expression that split his beard. Oh, we can move fast. I'll bring the commercial crew, the guys who frame skyscrapers. We'll have this place wrapped up tighter than a Thanksgiving turkey in 3 days. As we stood there shaking hands on a deal that cost more than my first 3 cars combined, I heard the familiar clip-clop of sensible heels on the pavement. Good morning. I closed my eyes for a second, summoned my inner Zen master, and turned around. Patricia was standing at the edge of the driveway, eyeing Jim's truck with deep suspicion. Good morning, Patricia, I said. This is Jim. He's my color consultant. Jim, to his credit, didn't laugh. He tipped his cap. Ma'am? Patricia looked Jim up and down. Jim looked like he ate nails for breakfast. He did not look like a color consultant. He looked like the guy you call when you need to move a body or a bridge abutment. I see, Patricia said, her voice dripping with skepticism. I'm glad to see you're taking this seriously, Mark. Though I must say, usually consultants bring swatch books, not heavy machinery. Big job requires big tools, Jim said, his voice deadpan. Well, Patricia sniffed, turning her attention to the house. I certainly hope you're steering him toward something warm. We were discussing Tuscan sun, or perhaps harvest gold, something that feels like a hug. Jim looked at me. I looked at Jim. We're going for something very energetic, Jim said solemnly. High impact. We want the house to really interact with the environment. Interact, Patricia repeated, tasting the word. I like that. Yes, connectivity, harmony with the elements. Oh, it'll harmonize with the elements, all right, Jim said, especially the sun. We're thinking of a finish that really captures the essence of the Arizona sky. Sky blue? Patricia frowned. Blues can be tricky. They can be cold. Not blue, I interjected. Just sky. Patricia looked confused, but she didn't want to admit she didn't understand, so she just nodded sagely. Well, I look forward to the application. Just remember, Mark, you have 26 days left. Clock is ticking. She turned and marched back to her house. Jim watched her go. Then he looked at the sample in his hand. Then he looked at her vinyl siding. She has no idea, does she? Jim asked. Not a clue. This is going to be fun, Jim said, tossing the sample back into the case. I'll draft the contract. You wire the deposit. We ride at dawn on Wednesday. The next 2 days were an exercise in anxiety. I walked around my house, saying goodbye to the beige. I actually started to hate it more, now that I knew it was doomed. Patricia was right about one thing. It was boring. It was the architectural equivalent of oatmeal. I spent the time reading the bylaws again, just to be absolutely sure. I highlighted the words vibrant, clean, and brightness. I even looked up the legal definition of siding versus paint. The bylaws mentioned exterior surface material must be high quality. ACM panels were the highest quality. They were used on airports. You couldn't get higher quality unless I gold-plated the damn thing. Wednesday arrived, and with it, the invasion. It wasn't just Jim's truck this time. It was a fleet. 3 white vans, a flatbed delivery truck carrying crates of aluminum framing, and a lull, one of those telescoping forklifts that beeped incessantly as it backed into my driveway. The noise was incredible. The clank, clank, clank of steel scaffolding being erected echoed through the cul-de-sac like a drum solo from hell. The neighbors came out. Not just Patricia. Old Mr. Henderson, no relation, from next door came out in his bathrobe. The young couple with the terrifying toddler from down the block stopped their stroller. They watched as a team of 6 guys, all wearing neon yellow vests and hard hats, swarmed my house. They didn't use brushes or rollers. They used impact drivers and hammer drills. Zzzt, chunk. Zzzt, chunk. The sound of the Z-girts being screwed into my studs was rhythmic and loud. Patricia was on my lawn by 8:15 a.m. "Mark!" she shouted over the noise of a chop saw cutting aluminum. "Mark, what is happening?" I walked over, holding a cup of coffee, wearing earplugs which I made a show of removing. "Good morning, Patricia. Just prepping the surface." "Prepping?" she shrieked, pointing at the metal framing that now grid-lined my house. "You're attaching metal bars to the structure. This is supposed to be a paint job." "Actually," I said, pulling a folded piece of paper from my pocket, "the letter demanded I address the exterior surfaces. It didn't specify paint. It demanded vibrancy. I realized paint just wasn't going to cut it. It wasn't vibrational enough. So I'm upgrading the cladding." "Cladding?" Her eyes bulged. "What kind of cladding? Vinyl? Hardy board?" "Better," I said. "Composite, top of the line. Very modern, very clean." She looked at the metal frame. "It looks industrial. It looks like you're building a jail." "It's the understructure, Patricia. The bones. You have to have good bones to support the energy. She didn't know what to say to that. The word energy was her kryptonite. If she argued against it, she was arguing against her own pseudo-spiritual philosophy. Well, she huffed, it better be tasteful. If you put up corrugated tin like some sort of Appalachian shack, I will have the legal team on you so fast your head will spin. Trust the process, I said, winking. By Friday, the framing was done. My house looked like a skeleton. It was covered in a grid of silver aluminum rails. It already looked brighter just from the raw metal, but the real show was about to begin. The panels arrived on a dedicated flatbed. They were stacked, on pallets wrapped in heavy plastic. Jim called me over. Okay, here's the game plan. These panels come with a protective film on them. It's a thick, heavy vinyl sticker to keep the chrome from getting scratched during install. The sticker is, well, take a look. He pointed to the stack. The protective film was a dull, flat, lifeless gray. It looked like wet concrete. We leave the film on until the very end, Jim explained. We install everything with the gray sticker facing out. Then, once every screw is set and every caulk line is dry, we do the peel. It's the best part. I looked at the gray sticker. It was hideous. It was even more depressing than the beige. Jim, I said, a devious idea forming. How long can we leave that film on? Technically, a few weeks. But the sun bakes the adhesive if you leave it too long. Can we leave it on for the weekend? Jim laughed. You want to let her stew? I want to let her think she won. I want her to think I replaced my boring beige house with a boring gray house. I want to see the disappointment on her face before I unleash the supernova. You're a sick man, Mark, Jim said approvingly. We'll leave the film on. The installation was fast. These guys were pros. They worked with the efficiency of a pit crew. Panel after panel went up, clipped into the rails, riveted in place. My house transformed. The beige was gone, completely swallowed by the new facade. But instead of a mirror, it was now a monolithic gray block. It looked like a Soviet brutalist library. It was severe, it was joyless. It was perfect. By Saturday afternoon, the crew was packing up. The house was fully clad. I stood in the yard. It was ugly. I mean, objectively, with the film on, it was an eyesore. It looked like I had wrapped the house in duct tape. Patricia came over. She didn't march this time. She strolled. She had a look of triumphant smugness that was almost palpable. Well, she said, stopping next to me. She gestured at the gray monstrosity. It's certainly different. It's industrial slate, I lied. Very trendy in Berlin right now. It's gray, Mark, she said flatly. It is a very, very dark gray. It catches the mood, don't you think? I think, she said, pursing her lips, that it is technically not beige. So legally you have complied with the order to change the color. But spiritually? Mark, this is heavy. It feels like a tomb. I'm not sure this contributes to the brightness of the neighborhood. Oh, give it a chance, I said. It really changes depending on the light. I doubt it, she said. But fine, the beige is gone. I suppose we'll have to live with this bunker. I'll let the committee know you've complied barely. But honestly, Mark, I expected more from you. I thought you had a spark. She walked away, shaking her head. I watched her go. She thinks it's over, Jim whispered. He had appeared behind me like a ninja in steel-toed boots. She has no idea, I said. When do we peel? Jim asked. I looked at the sky. The weather forecast called for a clear, cloudless Sunday. 100 degrees, high UV index. Tomorrow morning, I said. Sunday, the Lord's Day. Let there be light. Sunday morning dawned hot and bright. The air was already shimmering at 8:00 a.m. Jim brought the crew back, but this time they weren't carrying drills. They were empty-handed. They were the reveal team. We started at the back of the house, just to get the rhythm down. The film was tough. You had to catch the corner with a fingernail or a plastic blade and then pull. It came off with a satisfying sh-whip sound. As the first sheet came down on the back patio, I gasped. I knew it was going to be shiny. I didn't realize it was going to be invisible. The panel reflected the backyard grass and the wooden fence so perfectly that the house seemed to disappear. It was like an optical illusion. It was camouflage technology from a sci-fi movie. "Holy cow," one of the workers muttered. He checked his hair in the wall. "That is crisp." "All right," Jim said. "Front of the house? Let's give the people a show." We moved to the front. The street was quiet. It was 9:00 a.m. Most people were sleeping in or getting ready for church. Patricia's car was in her driveway. Jim assigned a guy to each section of the front wall. "On my count," Jim said. "Grab a corner." 4 guys grabbed the top corners of the protective film on the lower level panels. 3, 2, 1, peel. They pulled in unison, the gray vinyl sheets stripped away, fluttering to the ground like dead skin. And then the sun hit it. It wasn't a reflection. It was an assault. The morning sun, hanging low in the eastern sky, slammed into the eastern face of my house and bounced off with 98% efficiency. A wall of pure, concentrated white light blasted across the street. It was instantaneous. 1 second, there was a gray wall. The next second, there was a supernova. I had to look away. Even standing to the side, the ambient scattering of light made me squint. "Good Lord," Jim said, pulling a pair of polarized Oakleys from his pocket and sliding them on. "That is aggressive." The reflection didn't just light up the street. It lit up Patricia's house. Her house faced west, meaning her front windows were currently in the shade of the morning. Or they were. Now her entire front facade was bathed in a light that was brighter than high noon. It was like a spotlight from a police helicopter, but the helicopter was the size of a 2-story building. I saw the movement in her window first. The blinds were closed, but the light was blasting through the slats so intensely that I could see the silhouette of the furniture inside. The front door of Patricia's house flew open. She stepped out, wearing a silk robe and holding a coffee mug. She looked up, expecting to see, I don't know, a nuclear explosion? A meteor? She looked directly at my house. She screamed. It wasn't a scream of terror, exactly. It was a scream of sensory overload. She dropped her coffee mug. It shattered on the porch, but nobody looked at it. She threw her hands up over her face, shielding her eyes like a vampire exposed to dawn. "Mark!" she shrieked. "What did you do?" I was already wearing my aviators. I walked to the edge of the driveway. The heat coming off the reflection was palpable. It felt like standing next to a bonfire. "I brightened it up," I yelled back. "Is it vibrant enough for you, Patricia?" "I can't see," she yelled, stumbling back toward her door. "It's blinding. Turn it off." "I can't turn off a house, Patricia. It's the new cladding. It's super chrome. It reflects the community's energy." "It hurts." She fumbled for the doorknob, missed it, found it, and practically fell back inside her house, slamming the door. The reflection remained, burning a rectangular hole of brilliance into her front porch. Jim was laughing so hard he had to lean against the truck. "Did you see her? She looked like the Nazis at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark." "We're not done," I said, looking at the second story. "We still have the top half to peel." By noon, the entire house was stripped. The gray film was piled in a dumpster. My house was now a monolithic, seamless mirror. Cars were slowing down as they drove past. People were stopping. A jogger actually ran into a stop sign because he was staring at his own reflection in my garage door. But the real problem, or the real solution, depending on your perspective, was the physics of the situation. As the sun climbed higher, the angle of the reflection changed. In the morning, it was a broad wash of light. But my house had architectural details. There was a bay window on the second floor. The panels there were angled slightly. Jim noticed it first. "Mark," he said, pointing at the street. "Look at the asphalt." I looked. There was a spot on the blacktop, right in the middle of the road, that was shimmering. Not just heat shimmering. It looked like the road was soft. "Focus point," Jim said. "The bay window is acting like a concave mirror. It's focusing the beam." "Where is it tracking?" I asked. We watched. As the sun moved west, the focused beam of light moved east. It crawled across the asphalt. It crawled up the curb. It began to creep across Patricia's lawn. It hit a plastic pink flamingo near her mailbox. We watched in fascinated silence. The flamingo didn't melt immediately. It took about 30 seconds. First, the beak drooped. Then the neck went soft. Then, the whole bird just collapsed into a puddle of neon pink goo. "That," Jim said, checking his watch, "is impressive." "It's heading for the house," I said. The beam continued its slow, inevitable march. It hit the violently happy petunias. They wilted instantly, turning brown and crispy in seconds. And then, around 2:00 p.m., the beam hit the huts, siding. Patricia's house was clad in vinyl, polyvinyl chloride. It has a melting point of roughly 160 degrees Fahrenheit. The focused reflection from my house, amplified by the angle of the bay window, was easily pushing 200. It started subtly. The horizontal lines of her sage-green siding began to waver. They looked like wavy lines in a cartoon. Then they started to sag. It looked like the house was having a stroke. The siding unzipped from the locking tabs. Huge sheets of vinyl began to curl and droop, sliding down the Tyvek wrap underneath like mozzarella cheese sliding off a hot pizza. I stood there, beer in hand, watching the slow-motion destruction. "You know," I said to Jim, "I think she was right. The neighborhood really does feel more vibrant now." Jim took a swig of his water. "Vibrational integrity restored, boss." Suddenly, Patricia's front door opened again. She came out, wearing sunglasses this time, and a wide-brimmed hat. She looked at my house, shielding her eyes. Then she looked at her own house. She saw the melted flamingo. She saw the scorched petunias. And then she looked at the wall next to her front door. A 3-foot section of siding had pooled onto the porch floor. She touched the wall. She yanked her hand back with a yelp. She turned to me, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "You are burning my house down!" she screamed. "I'm not doing anything," I shouted back. "I'm just existing. It's the sun, Patricia. It's nature. It's the energy flow." "I'm calling the police," she shrieked. "I'm calling the fire department. This is arson. This is an attack with a deadly weapon." "It's a house," I yelled. "It's a stationary object." She fumbled for her phone, dialing frantically. I looked at Jim. "Here we go." "I'll get the popcorn," Jim said. The fire truck arrived first. You could hear the sirens from miles away. They turned into the cul-de-sac and immediately slammed on the brakes. The Driver had been blinded. The fire truck came to a halt at a weird angle. Firefighters piled out, looking confused. They were wearing full gear. They looked at my house, squinting. Then they looked at Patricia's house. The captain walked over. He was a big guy, older, with a mustache that had seen some things. "Who's the homeowner?" he barked. "I am," I said, stepping forward. "And her?" He pointed to Patricia, who was currently hysterical, pointing at the melted siding. "Neighbor." The captain walked up to my house. He stopped about 10 feet away. He put his hand up, feeling the heat radiating off the wall. "What is this material?" he asked. "Polished aluminum composite," I said. "Non-combustible. Class A fire rating." "It's a mirror," the captain said. "It's highly reflective siding," I corrected. He turned and looked across the street. He saw the path of destruction. The flamingo, the flowers, the sagging vinyl. He walked over to Patricia's house. He pulled out a thermal imaging camera. He pointed it at her wall. 210 degrees, he muttered. "He's burning me out," Patricia yelled, grabbing the captain's arm. "Arrest him! He's focusing a death ray on my house!" The captain looked at her, then back at my house. He took off his helmet and scratched his head. "Ma'am," the captain said, "he's not doing anything. His house is just sitting there. He did it on purpose. He knows the sun sets in the west." "Well, yes, ma'am, the sun has been setting in the west for quite some time now. He clad his house in mirrors to melt mine." The police arrived next. Officer Miller. I knew Miller. He was the one who came out when I had the table saw incident. He looked tired. He walked up, put on his sunglasses, and looked at the scene. "Mark," Miller said. "Officer, your house is bright." "Compliance, officer. HOA demanded vibrancy." Miller looked at the melted siding across the street. He looked at the perfect, shimmering surface of my house. He looked at the smoldering remains of the flamingo. "Is that a flamingo?" Miller asked. "It was," I said. "Now it's abstract art." Miller sighed. He walked over to Patricia and the fire captain. "Is there a fire?" Miller asked. "No active flame," the captain said. "Just radiative heating. The vinyl is failing structurally due to thermal exposure." "So no crime?" Miller asked. "I don't know," the captain said. "Is it illegal to be shiny?" Patricia lost it. "It has to be illegal. Look at the damage. He has to pay for this. He has to take it down." Miller walked back to me. "Mark, look. It's a bit much. You're melting her house." "Officer, the HOA bylaws state that exterior surfaces must be vibrant, clean, and contribute to brightness. They do not specify a maximum reflectivity. I am in full compliance with the written rules. If her siding is not heat-resistant enough to handle the neighborhood's new brilliance, that sounds like a code violation on her part. Maybe she used cheap materials." Jim chimed in from the sidelines. "Standard vinyl siding is rated for 165 degrees. He's right. She went with the budget stuff. If she'd gone with hardy plank, she'd be fine." Miller looked at Jim. "Who are you?" "I'm the contractor, and the supplier, and a witness to the fact that this house is awesome." Miller rubbed his temples. "Okay, here's the deal. Nobody is getting arrested because, technically, the sun is doing the damage, and we can't arrest the sun. But this is a civil nightmare. Patricia is going to sue you." "Let her," I said. "I have the letter, I have the bylaws, and I have a lawyer who hates HOAs. I'm going to need you to, I don't know, put a tarp up or something? Until the sun goes down?" Miller asked. "I don't have a tarp that big," I said. "Then move your truck," Jim said to me. I looked at my pickup. What? Park your truck in the driveway, Jim said. Block the reflection from the bay window. That's the lens. If you block that, the beam breaks. I looked at Patricia. She was weeping over her petunias. Fine, I said. I'll block the beam. For today. I pulled my truck forward. The shadow fell across the mirrored bay window. The death ray vanished. Patricia's house stopped sizzling, though it looked like a Salvador Dali painting now. The police left. The fire truck left. Patricia went inside her melted house and slammed the door, which didn't close properly because the frame had warped. I stood in the driveway with Jim. The sun was going down. The house was turning a deep, fiery orange as it reflected the sunset. It was beautiful. You know, Jim said, that's going to happen every day, from 2 o'clock to 4 HOA p.m., for the rest of the summer. I know, I said. She's going to call a meeting, Jim said. I'm counting on it, I replied. That's when the real fun starts. The emergency meeting notice was taped to my front door the next morning. It wasn't the usual polite beige cardstock. It was neon orange, the color of a traffic cone, and it was taped up with blue painter's tape, which felt like a personal attack on my aesthetic. Emergency meeting of the Board of Directors topic. Hazardous reflective surfaces and arson by architecture. Time, 7 o'clock p.m. Tonight, location, Community Rec Center. Arson by architecture, I read aloud, chuckling. That was actually catchy. I wondered if Jim could put that on a business card. I spent the day prepping. I didn't go to work. I went to Kinko's. I had the original letter Patricia sent me blown up to poster size and mounted on foam core. I printed out the bylaws. I highlighted the sections on vibrancy and community brightness in yellow highlighter so bright it was radioactive. I also printed out the spec sheet for sage green vinyl siding, specifically the section labeled thermal distortion temperature, 165 degrees. At 6:45 p.m., I walked to the community center. Jim met me in the parking lot. He was wearing a collared shirt, which looked wrong on him, like putting a tuxedo on a grizzly bear. He was carrying my foam core exhibits. You ready for this? Jim asked. I was born ready. You bring the laser pointer? Got it. The community center was packed. Usually, HOA meetings are attended by 3 people. Patricia, the treasurer, a guy named Gary who slept through everything, and maybe one unlucky soul trying to get permission to build a shed. Tonight, it was standing room only. The entire neighborhood was there. They wanted to see the man who had turned the sun into a laser weapon. As I walked in, the room went quiet. Then, a few people started whispering. I heard Sun King and Solar Flare. I nodded politely. Patricia sat at the head table. She looked exhausted. Her hair was a little frazzled, and she was wearing dark sunglasses indoors, presumably because the memory of my house was still burned into her retinas. She banged the gavel. It sounded weak. This emergency meeting is called to order, she announced, her voice trembling with righteous indignation. We are here to address the atrocity at 742 Evergreen Terrace. Point of order, I said, remaining seated but speaking clearly. The agenda calls it hazardous reflective surfaces. Let's stick to the official terminology. Patricia glared at me. Mr. Henderson has covered his house in industrial mirrors. As a result, my property has sustained significant thermal damage. My siding is destroyed. My landscaping is incinerated. This is a clear violation of everything. Decency, safety, common sense. Which bylaw? I asked. Excuse me? Which bylaw did I violate, Patricia? I stood up. Jim handed me the poster board with the blown-up letter. I set it on an easel facing the crowd. This is the letter I received 30 days ago, I told the room. In it, President Gable states that my previous paint color, sand dune, was, quote, aesthetically lethargic and lowered the vibrational energy of the street. She demanded I make the house vibrant and light-reflecting to contribute to the brightness of the community. I turned to the next board. A photo of my house in all its chrome glory. I complied, I said. I sourced a material that is 100% vibrant. It is the most light-reflecting material commercially available. I have raised the energy of this street to levels previously thought impossible by physics. You melted my house! Patricia screamed, standing up and pointing a shaking finger at me. You did it on purpose! I did not control the sun, Patricia, I said calmly. The sun did what the sun does. It shone. My house simply vibrated the energy back. Now, let's talk about your house. Jim handed me the next board. It was the spec sheet for her vinyl siding. This is the technical data for the siding on the president's house, I explained to the captivated audience. It is rated for 165 degrees Fahrenheit. That is the standard for economy-grade vinyl. Now, we live in a climate where ambient temperatures hit 110. Surface temperatures in direct sun can hit 150 naturally. The reflection from my house added maybe 40 degrees? 50. If Mrs. Gable had invested in high-quality materials, like, say, hardy board or brick, her house would be fine. But she chose the cheap stuff. Her house melted because it wasn't strong enough to handle the brilliance she demanded. A murmur went through the crowd. I saw heads nodding. These were people who had been fined for weeds, for trash cans left out 10 minutes too long, for mailbox posts that were the wrong shade of brown. They smelled blood. This is ridiculous, Patricia sputtered. The board moves to fine Mr. Henderson the maximum amount of $5,000 for creating a nuisance, and hereby orders the immediate removal of the mirrors at his own expense. Seconded, mumbled Gary, the treasurer, waking up briefly. Furthermore, Patricia continued, gaining steam, since the damage to my home was caused by an HOA-mandated change, I am motioning that the repairs to my siding, estimated at $25,000, be covered by the HOA Emergency Reserve Fund. The room stopped murmuring. It went dead silent. Excuse me, shouted Mr. Henderson, the neighbor, no relation. You want us to pay for your melted siding? It is an HOA matter, Patricia insisted. The association is liable. The association didn't tell him to turn his house into a disco ball, someone shouted from the back. Actually, I interjected, tapping the poster board. You did. We need sparkle. We need brilliance. Your words, Patricia. I meant yellow paint, she shrieked. I meant a nice, cheerful yellow, not this death ray. You didn't specify, I said. And because you were vague, I was creative. Now you want the neighbors to pay for your mistake? You want to drain the reserve fund, money meant for the pool and the gate repairs? To fix your cheap vinyl because you couldn't handle the reflection of your own demands? The mood in the room shifted violently. It wasn't just amusement anymore. It was financial self-defense. I vote no, yelled the lady with the toddler. I'm not paying for her siding. No way, shouted a guy in a stained t-shirt. Fix it yourself, Patricia. Patricia looked around, wide-eyed. She was losing the room. She banged the gavel. but nobody cared. "Order! Order!" she cried. "If we don't fix it, the property values will plummet. My house looks like a candle that was left in a hot car." "And whose fault is that?" I asked softly. She looked at me. She looked at the angry mob of neighbors. She realized she was cornered. If she forced the vote, she'd be ousted. If she sued me, I'd drag it out for years using her own vague bylaws against her. And in the meantime, every day from 2:00 p.m. to 4:00 p.m., her house would continue to melt. She slumped into her chair. "What do you want, Mark?" I smiled. This was the moment. "I'm a reasonable man," I said. "I don't want to blind pilots. I don't want to melt flamingos. I am willing to modify the finish." "You'll take it down?" she asked, hope flaring in her eyes. "No, I paid 50 grand for this siding. It stays. However," I gestured to Jim, "my contractor informs me there is a translucent matte finish film, an anti-glare wrap, that can be applied over the chrome. It will turn the mirror finish into a soft satin silver. It will still be metallic. It will still be modern, but it won't reflect a focused beam. It will diffuse the light." "Do it," she said instantly. "Do it tomorrow." "Ah," I held up a finger. "There's a catch. The film costs money. And labor costs money. And frankly, I'm tired of reading letters from you." I pulled a document from my back pocket. It was a thick legal agreement I'd had my lawyer draft that morning. "This is a binding agreement between the Oak Creek Estates HOA and Mark Henderson. It states 3 things. 1. The HOA acknowledges that the current siding is fully compliant with all bylaws. 2. The HOA will grant a permanent variance for my property, exempting it from all aesthetic fines, color restrictions, and vibrancy complaints for a period of 99 years. 3. Mrs. Gable signs a waiver holding me harmless for the damage to her siding, acknowledging that it was an act of God via the sun." "I can't sign that," she whispered. 99 years? You could paint a mural of a butt on your garage door." "I could," I agreed. "But I won't. I just want to be left alone, Patricia. I want to drink my beer, fix my car, and live in my house without you measuring the length of my grass with a ruler. Sign the paper, and I apply the matte film. Don't sign it, and tomorrow looks like a sunny day. I hear the forecast is 105. She looked at the document. She looked at the crowd, who were all crossing their arms, daring her to use their money to fight me. She looked at her phone, where I assumed she had a picture of her melted house. She grabbed the pen. She signed it so hard the tip tore the paper. "Motion passed," she choked out. "Meeting adjourned." The next day, Jim's crew was back. They applied the matte film. It was a high-tech, frosted clear coat that adhered to the aluminum. As they rolled it on, the blinding glare vanished. The house transformed from a weapon of mass destruction into a sleek, sophisticated satin silver structure. It actually looked really good. It looked like an Apple store, but cooler. It still reflected the light, but it was a soft, glowing luminescence rather than a laser beam. I stood in the driveway with Jim as the last section was finished. It was 2:30 p.m. The sun was hitting the bay window. Across the street, Patricia's contractors were ripping the melted siding off her house. She was standing there, watching them, looking defeated. The beam didn't appear. The matte finish caught the sunlight and scattered it in a million directions. My house glowed like a pearl. Patricia looked over. She saw the glow. She saw me. I raised my beer. She didn't wave. She just turned around and went into her half-naked house. "You know," Jim said, packing up his gear, "with that waiver, you really could do anything now. You could put a moat in." "Don't tempt me, Jim," I said. "I think the vibration here is just right." I looked at my house. It wasn't beige. It wasn't boring. It was the most technologically advanced, legally protected, spite-fueled structure in the county. And it was vibrant. It was so vibrant. The end.